Welcome back, everyone, to episode number 32 of the Beginner to Master Speedrun. Coming into today on a 103 game win streak, rated 1421. So I'll try and keep it going. Let's just hop into the first game. Okay, first opponent playing OK Golfer. And I'll go for King's Pawn. I have been playing a bit more Ponziani recently, but I think in this game I'll go for an Italian. And we see a pretty rare gambit. This is called the Rousseau Gambit, which, as far as I know, should be a little bit dubious, but it does require some precise play from white. So, I mean, of course, if I take the pawn, then black can expand with e4. Probably don't want that, like queen e2 and then d5. So I'm pretty sure the best move here is d4, which I'll go ahead and play. Creates a lot of tension in the center. But I will admit that I haven't really studied this opening so in depth, so really don't know too much beyond pawn d4. But I'm pretty sure that if takes, I can just take on e5 and have a very fine position. So we'll see what black wants to do here. Opponent's taking time, so that's actually a good sign, given that my opponent maybe tried to surprise me in the opening, but perhaps not prepared for d4. Black takes with a pawn on d4, so this gives me some options. I could take back with the knight. I think that might be the most intuitive move. I could take on f5 as well. I could play e5 to try and snag some space. And then maybe if I play e5, then white's the one who's gambiting. But I do like the prospect of taking. Just to calculate some possibly forcing line, if pawn takes pawn, I can take the knight. And then whatever takes back, I think I'll have queen h5. If black has to play g6, there's queen e5. That's a very common pattern to try and win the rook on h8. So yeah, let's start with this. And of course, if knight takes, I can take with queen, support the pawn. So I'll have to check after the game, like what the proper way to play this opening is. But it seems like a very fine position. I have more development, more central control. And sometimes it's not great to bring out the queen early, but in this case, the queen's actually very nicely placed here. Not easy for black to attack. And I'll be ready to castle very soon. Hopefully get a rook to align with black's king. Black plays queen e7. So pinning the pawn. And castling still comes to mind. Would maybe allow black to take. And then I don't quite have rook e1 because the rook's not supported there. So there's another move here to play knight c3. Preventing queen takes e4. And if knight c3, pawn takes e4, then knight d5 looks really attractive. Hitting the queen and the c7 pawn. So I'm leaning more towards that. I mean, e5 is another option, but e5 could run into d6. So yeah, I like knight c3. In these sort of positions, you usually want to look to accelerate development and develop as quickly and efficiently as possible. And if I get to play knight d5 next, then I mean, black might have some issues. Queen d6, there's bishop f4. I'm curious what black's going to do here. And maybe queen c5 is an idea to try and trade queens, neutralize any pressure I might have. But black takes the pawn. So, I mean, of course, the normal response is just to take back. But, I mean, knight to d5 looks so strong. I'll just go for it. And now Yeah, the queen is hit. These moves don't work because, yeah, queen c5 I can take and take. Queen d6, bishop f4, nice skewer that will lead to the fork. So I think the only attempt for black is to play queen d8, which is not the prettiest move, basically setting up the starting position. And if we see queen d8, it'll be a question how to put the hammer down. Actually, it might be very simple. I have queen e5 there, hitting the king and pretty much guaranteeing knight takes c7. So we're 8 moves in. I think black's opening has already pretty badly backfired. Yeah, let's go for bishop f4. I mean, just going back to basic opening principles, sometimes if you can develop more rapidly than your opponent, develop with attack, then good things can happen very quickly. That was a very extreme example, winning in 9 moves. So, I mean, there are cases where the Rousseau Gambit can be tricky for white, but in this case it was perhaps trickier for black. So if we go back, let's just see how black should have played. I mean, pawn d4 is the best move. The engine does prefer white here. It gives about plus 1.2. The best move would have been to take on e4. I would take on e5 and then d5. And yeah, at least here black can stabilize the center. White still has pressure. Yeah, it actually looks good for white, even in the main line, because engine's saying queen d6. And this seems to walk into bishop f4. So might be one of these openings that you don't want to play against someone who knows the best move. If we see what happened in the game after takes and then takes, yeah, black had to be really, really careful here. Apparently knight f6 was best, just to develop and pressure the center. But yeah, after takes, and queen e7, it was pretty smooth sailing from here. Maybe black could have tried c6 here to prevent knight d5, but life was still very good for white. So a nice quick game to start the episode. Let's keep it going. Another game, playing Ponzi. Oh, Ponzi Scheme King. Nice name from America. We'll have a Queen's Pawn opening. Are we going to see London or Queen's Gambit? Or something else? Maybe London? Okay, we do see the London. And I'll go for what I usually like to go for. It's a reverse Queen's Gambit. Very rarely do people take. If white were to take, I could win back the pawn with either queen a5 or e6. With c3, I think I'll keep developing. I'll play knight c6. Usually people will build the triangle formation with the pawns. Now, maybe it's possible for white to take here, because b4 is supported by the c pawn, but it's still not something to be super concerned about. And if white takes, maybe I can play a5 and then work to win back the pawn with the bishop. Opponent's taking time here. White's starting with knight d2, so not the most common move order, but yeah, it looks playable. Generally, when I play this setup against the London, I like to go for queen b6. And I think I can still go for it here. Now, it is a question, do I want to start by taking? Maybe I do. So if I take first, and then take, and then queen b6, there's a common move queen b3 to try and defend at least a b2 pawn, but that would walk into knight takes d4. And then if takes, I would take kind of the in-between move with check. In that line, I would win a pawn. So I'm going to go for this. Usually when white plays e3 rather than knight d2, I would go for queen b6 immediately. But because of kind of the fact that I'm attacking b2 and d4 in this line, this looks a little bit more attractive. And white's taking time. I mean, pawn takes is definitely the most natural. Knight takes does look playable. At first, maybe it looks like there's a fork, but okay, white could take. We don't see that, so continue with queen b6. And this is usually one of the main approaches for black against a London, is to target the b2 pawn. Just the nature of developing the bishop early leaves the pawn undefended. And sometimes if you want to play aggressively against a London, this is the way to go. But white's showing either showing no fear or showing ignorance. I have to figure out exactly what's happening here, because I am able to take the pawn, but do I actually want to? Is my queen getting stuck? There's cases where, like, if the knight develops to c3 and I take the pawn, there's knight b5. But I don't have to worry about that in this line. If knight b3, I have queen c3 check. I mean, there's rook b1, but then I have a few options. Maybe taking, maybe moving back. So I think I'll go ahead and basically call white's bluff, taking the pawn. Of course, I am losing time, moving my queen now twice, and it's very likely going to have to move again pretty soon. But a pawn is a pawn. And if I get the chance, I'd really like to play bishop f5, maybe eventually bishop c2, but not going to have the chance right away. Well, he plays rook b1, so giving me another pawn. How greedy do I want to be? Taking a moment here, but yeah, it's two pawns. If white moves back, I move back. I don't think white can force a draw, because eventually I'll slide away on the dark squares. Yeah, I'm going to take the pawn. This is definitely risky, but it's going to be up to white to try and prove compensation. Bishop b5 makes a lot of sense. Pinning my knight, maybe setting up this. White's ready to build up a lot of attackers against the knight. So now I do have to be careful. Bishop f5 looks pretty natural, but that could induce rook c1. So, I mean, it's a position where I might end up trying to give back material just to develop. The benefit of being up two pawns is I can give back one pawn and then still be up a pawn, according to the laws of mathematics. So I'm actually thinking of maybe playing bishop f5, rook c1, a6. Induce white to take. I would give the pawn, and then I can try and develop. Yeah, let's go for this. Just double checking here. I don't think I mind rook a1 because queen b2. I'm definitely playing in a risky fashion. But the game is getting interesting now. I imagine white's going to choose between one of these moves, but instead, white ignores the fact I'm attacking the rook, plays knight e5. That's actually a really scary move, which I kind of overlooked. Because do I actually have time to take the rook? White takes here. I don't think I do. I have to watch my time too. I mean, maybe rook c8 is called for. Yeah, knight e5 is a really good move. Yeah, because if takes and then takes, I can't take back. If I play a6, there's knight b4 to win my queen. Oh dear. Actually, can I go for that line? One more time. Takes, takes, a6, knight b4, I take, knight takes, I lose my queen. After all said and done, I have rook. Having trouble counting though. No, I don't think that's enough. It's rook, bishop, and pawn. I'm gonna play rook c8. Getting very low on time now too. Imagine white's gonna try rook c1. And I think at this point I'm just in damage control mode. I'll play bishop d7, breaking the pin. And this is not what I had in mind when I played bishop f5 earlier to develop my bishop. But at least I'm breaking the pin. I'm defending c6 again. And the ball is back in white's court. Now, I'm not actually threatening to take because rook takes c8 would be checkmate. My bishop would be pinned. So, yeah, what is my threat here? Maybe a6, maybe e6. I mean, I'm 3 moves away from castling, which doesn't sound like much, but it might feel like an eternity, especially if white keeps making threats. It's hard to actually apply more pressure. Like, the queen can't really come in without allowing the queen trade. This knight has a hard time getting into play. So maybe white can take... I would take back with a knight. I think everything is still under control. And this is not your typical London. Usually London has a very slow and solid reputation, but now white's going full aggro mode. So, okay, we trade bishop for knight. I'm still up 2 pawns. So really the goal is just to hold on, complete development, maintain the material advantage. And maybe it's possible for white to play rook a1 and try and win this pawn. I think now I'm just going to drop back to a5. Attacking the bishop. Ensuring my queen can come back to safety. And generally, like when you're the one defending, you want to look for trades just to relieve the pressure. More pieces that come off the board, the harder it is for white to attack. So white avoids the trades. I'll play e6. And looks like everything is under control now. Even though my king's still in the center, everything is pretty well defended. I mean, knight b3 can come with tempo. And then maybe I drop back all the way to d8. Looks passive, but the queen is safe there. Yeah, I'll play queen d8. Queen b6 was also possible, but queen b6 would run into rook b1. White plays knight c5, so happy to trade. Bishop e7. Yeah, the pawn on c5 controls some space, but I think eventually it's going to be a target, as it is isolated, pressured by the bishop and rook. Maybe at some point I can play e5 too, just control more center. Okay, white's pressuring the b-pawn. It's a good move. Because if I play queen d7, there's rook b1. But then maybe I win the c-pawn. So yeah, might as well start with this. And I really wouldn't mind a queen trade, having extra pawns. Still haven't castled yet, but I'm ready to. It's possible for white to go for perhaps like rook fd1 and then e4. But if white goes for that, maybe I can play d4 and e5, just gain space. I'm a bit more focused now on what to do after rook b1, but okay, it doesn't happen. Bishop d3 is played. So yeah, let's castle, connecting the rooks. I could have played e5, but let's save it for later. On e4. Well, now if I play e5, there's takes. Probably don't want to go into that. I'm really debating between this or something else. Maybe taking. Play this or this. Knight d4 actually looks nice. It's not the move I initially looked at. Knight d4, queen b4. Yeah, let me go for this. It's a more tactical move. I mean, I'm attacking the queen. I'm also unleashing the rook to hit the pawn. There's another idea too. Oh, wait a minute. Be careful. If I take, there's takes. It's very tricky. Maybe I take here first. I was going to say that the other idea was to eventually get in knight e2. But now the queen controls e2. Yeah, still have to be aware of the tactics. Let me take on c5. Knight supported twice by the queen and bishop. b7 is loose. I don't think I mind if white takes it. Up 3 pawns now. Very hard fought game. I mean, we've both used most of our time. Might as well play rook. Rook d8, bishop. I think this is okay. Looking at bishop b7, looks like it traps a rook. But then there's a kind of cool move, knight e2. I mean, big kudos to my opponent for keeping the pressure. I mean, still not easy, even though I'm up 3 pawns. So after bishop takes b7, yeah, the bishops dominate the rook. But with knight e2, I'm essentially forcing the trade. Queen takes e2, and then I can take the bishop. I mean, maybe even rook b8 is possible there. To then pin on the b file. And there really have not been too many games in this speedrun where both me and my opponent get so low on time. I can't recall if I've won a game on time in this speedrun. If I play this king h1, my queen's attacked. So play f5. Queen b1 was a good move. I think I'll go for this. Bishop takes b7 and then rook b8. Okay, let's go for this. Just offering the trade of bishops. Be a little bit careful. Could move back. Safety first. Okay, now it feels like I have plenty of time compared to my opponent. I'll just try and switch gears here and create some kingside attack. Go ahead and threaten checkmate against h2. How to do this? What to do? Just a matter of moving quickly. Unleash the rook. Defend the pawn. Okay. I won on time, but my opponent played like a very hard-fought game. Actually, the final position was slightly better for white according to the engine. Apparently, yeah, this last move, queen g6, is not so good. Because the e6 pawn is really weak. And if somehow the game could continue, white has bishop c4, and even though black is currently up 3 pawns, the engine slightly favors white. But why? Because rook e8. Oh, and then rook d7. And then white's winning. Because I don't have a good way to defend g7. Wow. So I think I'm fortunate to survive there. Let's just go through this one, try and take away some lessons. Yeah, not the most typical move order. I was explaining this line. If queen b3, then my plan was to take on d4 to try and win a pawn. Because if takes, I don't take back right away. I could take, and let's say takes, and black is up a pawn here. That didn't happen though, because white played e3, sacked on b2. And this is not an opening position I've studied before, but apparently it's very playable for white. Engine actually slightly prefers white, despite being down a pawn. And after queen takes a2, yeah, this is actually a mistake by me. Bishop b5, and white has full compensation for the 2 pawns. Bishop f5 was a mistake, but not because of knight e5. Oh, wow. So we both played inaccurately here. My only good move... Okay, rook c8 was a mistake. My only good move was to take the rook, which I didn't go for because knight takes c6. But apparently after takes and king d8 and takes, black is doing fine. Black's up a pawn. Even though I've lost castling rights, white can't castle, this bishop's a bit stuck. Yeah, it's a hard line to judge from a distance though. Maybe if it were a much longer game, I could calculate that. I was calculating a6. I didn't go for this because knight b4 and takes. And yeah, this is just better for white. So, I mean, yeah, I went for rook c8, and according to the engine, white's best line was rook a1, queen b2, take with the bishop on c6, and after bc6, then white can choose between taking on a7 or castling. It would still be a kind of tough battle from here. White's actually only slightly better here. So I think I was fortunate to survive after bishop d7, take. Like even here, white had compensation. Bishop e2 was not the best move. Engine saying takes, and then either rook a1 or knight f3, and then try and target the pawns. So very interesting game. I think I have a lot to learn myself from this game, but hopefully it goes to show why being greedy in the opening is not always a good idea, and I almost paid the price for it. But it is sometimes a strategy in chess to just try and snag material and then survive. And that's what I did manage to do this game, even though it was not the cleanest. So, okay, that was a long fight. But let's keep it going. Let's do one more. We'll have a 3-game episode. And this time I'm white. I'll play e4. And I'll go for... Let's go for another Italian. I don't think we're going to see another Rousseau Gambit. we see a 2 knights. And I think I'll stick with very kind of classical Italian pawn d3. Knight g5, of course, is a more aggressive line, sometimes going into a fried liver. But with this, I'll play c3. Really just the beginning of, what do we call this? Oh, this is the Giuco piano. Chess.com knows best in terms of naming the openings. b6 is not a move I think I've ever seen before. I mean, usually black plays d6 or castling, sometimes a6 or a5. b6 seems a little bit disharmonious with the setup, especially with the bishop here. I mean, usually this signifies that black wants to fianchetto, but if I play a move like b4, the bishop's going to have to retreat. It can't stay on this diagonal. So I think it's a question, if I want to play b4 right away, I don't think I'm in any rush though. I think I'll just castle. I mean, it's hard to punish a move like b6 immediately, and sometimes the best approach is just to keep developing, follow opening principles. Now with this move, now I'm inclined to go for tactics, because the move that jumps out immediately is bishop takes f7, and it's a forcing line. Black would likely take back, but then I have knight g5 hitting the king and the knight supported by my bishop. That looks pretty clean. I'm going to go for bishop takes f7. I mean, these sort of tactics don't usually work in like a mainline Italian. But, okay, black doesn't take the bishop. Plays king f8. Now I'm inclined to just keep the pressure. Bishop g5. And there's also some argument to play pawn d4 immediately. I might be a little bit spoiled for choice here. I could also move the bishop back. Like there's, I think, a lot of acceptable moves. I'm realizing d4 takes and takes. Not sure about the line takes and takes and takes and takes, and then I lose my bishop in the end. So maybe it's best to keep it simple. Bishop d5 actually looks quite nice. I should note here that I'm not at all scared of bishop or knight takes f2. Be happy to take back with the rook. Black's not going for that. So now, maybe now pawn d4. Just hit the bishop, trying to open the center. Yeah, the pawn's supported by the c3 pawn, the knight, and the queen. So enough defenders. And I have a feeling for at least the next few moves, every move that I'll make will come with some sort of threat. Of course, here I'm threatening the bishop, but moves like bishop g5 and h3 will essentially improve and attack at the same time. Okay, so I think pawn takes is a bit more natural. Knight takes would attack the knight, but I think it's just nicer keeping the two pawns in the center, hitting the bishop, and then leaving the knight here to try and exploit later. I was thinking if bishop d6, then maybe I can play knight g5, hitting the knight and threatening knight f7. And bishop e7 would, of course, discourage knight g5. h6 also discourages knight g5, but just gives me the bishop. So this is definitely a much different feel compared to the previous game. Winning material and also having the attack. Now, I was expecting the knight to move, but black is trying to be creative here. This is, what do we call this? The fishing pole setup, or fishing pole trap. I don't think it's really a trap here because after takes, I'll make sure that I'm not going to get mated on the H file. There's other types of positions where like the knight moves, the queen comes in, and then black would be mating. But I think in this case, I can take, and then knight g5, preventing the queen from coming in, now stirring up my own attack. I'll take on g4. So winning a pawn, defending the knight, attacking the rook. Life is pretty good here. It feels very close to checkmate. Looking at queen, let's say queen f3, king g7, queen f7, king h8. Is it actually mating? Maybe not. It feels very close. One more time. Queen f3, king g7. I guess in the end I can take on g6. Winning another pawn. Again defending and attacking. Okay, let's go for this. There's no good way for black to block the check. If the king moves this way, it should be a quicker win. I mean, I guess there is king e7, queen f7, king d6, which black is going for. So now it should really be force mate. But where is it? Queen f7, king d6. Oh, I think I see it. Then pawn e5. Knight takes e5, knight e4 checkmate. I mean, there is king takes e5, but then bishop f4. Okay, we'll be having some fun. Yeah, pawn e5 is nice. It clears e4 square, and yeah, e5 square was taken away. So not a mating pattern that you see every day. Knight, bishop, and queen working together. But yeah, nice quick game to have, especially after the previous game. If we just go back here and take away at least a few lessons. I mean, my opponent played like a very normal opening and then proceeded to play a very abnormal middle game. Of course, yeah, as I mentioned, b6, not the move to go for. Like usually in the opening, of course you want to develop your pieces, but you want to do so in a harmonious fashion. And b6, it just kind of interferes with this bishop. Even when the bishop gets to b7, it doesn't really serve much purpose. e4 is very well defended. So the better approach here for black is to play d6. Let's say castle, castle, and yeah, life can go on here. Usually in the Italian, this bishop either develops to g4 or e6, or it waits and black can go for this knight maneuver, knight e7 to g6. And the positions would be much more of a fight compared to what happened in this game. So hopefully a lot of lessons to take away from today. I think I'll end it there. Thanks so much, everyone, for watching. If you have questions, do leave them below. And if you like the content, do subscribe. It does help the channel. And I'll see you guys soon.